Newbie Tuesday, where it's time to watch the world learn. For some reason, I can only think about dinner at a time like this, and as a result, I'm salivating profusely. It'd be really weird if that problem was related directly to my desire to cast StarCraft, but no, I'm actually just an organism. In very exciting news, we're going to be looking at the idea of simplifying Zerg build orders in today's daily. More on that in just a bit. Before the daily, what I'd like to do is get a glass of cold water, because not only is water good, but when you have that little bit of ice clanking against your lips, I don't know, that's just my thing. I like nice ice water. But, like most people in sunny southern Los Angeles, I don't have some fancy fridge with an ice dispenser like they have in the OC. I pour my water into the ice tray. Except, I don't know if I'm just awful at putting water into the ice tray, but I can never get the ice cubes out. Do you guys use that over there in chat? Do you use an ice tray? Where, like, you're supposed to, like, and twist it, and the ice cubes are supposed to just sort of pop up like little apples in water, just float to the top. Not me. When I turn it, it just shatters all the ice cubes, and they just spray everywhere. So I was in my freaking kitchen, just literally banging the ice tray against the fucking counter to get any amount of ice at all to fall out. And instead, it's just these shards spraying everywhere. And finally, I get that one ice cube out and immediately drop it on the floor. And of course, when that happens, the best part is I'm not going to clean it up. I just look at it and accept that that spot on the ground is going to be a little bit wet later. Because ice isn't real food. It's not like if you dropped a mushroom and you have to pick the mushroom up. And as you'll know, there's no ice in this water thing. I actually just gave up. But either way, at one point in time, I will certainly conquer my ice tray. Stupid ice cube drama. Guys, I wanted to announce something that I have been so pained to be unable to announce until now. Starting April 23rd will be Europe Week. Every daily I do will be at 10 a.m. Pacific and will be live in the evening times for you wonderful Euro folk. As a result, if you'd like to get up in the middle of your early morning slumber in America, perhaps you're at work and you want to tune in, perhaps you just live in Europe and you're tired of getting up at 5 a.m., I'll see you that week for a full week of EU dailies. Yeah! Love in Europe! Spread the word to all of Europeans. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the Day 9 daily topic of today. It is simplifying build orders, specifically for Zerg. In last week's Newbie Tuesday, what we looked at was build orders in a general sense that applied very, very cleanly, easily to Terran versus Protoss, but might have seemed a little bit weird for Zerg. For Terran and Protoss, but it seemed a little bit off for Zerg. The main reason build orders always seem a little bit weird for Zerg is that you don't know what to do with the droning mechanic. Quite simply with with Terran and Protoss, you're always building SCVs, you're always building probes. So when someone says something like, build a barracks on 12, you know that you just kept building SCVs and you hit 12. Even if someone says something like, build a starport at the 9-minute mark, you are just kind of building SCVs and you sort of accept that if you didn't miss any, you should have enough money to do this at this point in time. With Zerg, there are periods where you should be building drones. There are periods where you sneak out a couple Zerglings and do all the rest drones. There are periods where you are building just 5 drones and all the rest are units. And that little weirdism results in this kind of stuttering and stopping of the increase of your worker rate, making things confusing. So we're going to be looking at that starting now. To talk about this, what I want to do is very, 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 very briefly review what we did last week. Also, I want to note that the first, probably say 2/3 of today's daily are going to be focused on build orders from the Zerg point of view and how to simplify them and how to think about them. And at the end, what we're going to do is we're going to look at some of your submissions, because I asked for homework last week for you to play 15 games, honing down and focusing in on a build order, and to send me those games. We're going to be looking at a fine individual named Nix who submitted. So first, what I want to do is recap the basic idea of what we did last week. So here we have TSL Pult versus Acer Nerchio. This is the game that we looked at where we saw Pult do something a little bit interesting. I'm actually going to go ahead and skip to the 4-minute mark He did all sorts of cool things, where he, oh, and by the way, I was dabbling around some 4v4s last night, so excellent, cool. Looks like my volume didn't change too much. We're going to review the basic idea of what we saw Pult do, where he kind of opens with this interesting, double reactor Hellion with a very fast orbital command, fast stim, and then he gets these other barracks up, he gets these engineering bays up as well. And he goes straight for a factory. Or excuse me, for a starport with double medevac. And there's a lot of complicated things going on here. Where we had, you know, some engineering bays popping up early, a very early stim upgrade. We have some Hellions doing some interesting things on the map. And here's the idea that we began with, that we are not going to think about everything all at once. A build order obviously involves things like what units you build, when you attack with them, what buildings you're throwing down, but we're going to simplify it in the following order. We first, most basically, are going to list out very simple building lists. I put gas here, and that's actually something we're going to focus on for the Zergs. But basically, you just first think about your build order in terms of the buildings. And specifically, we do what we call building groups. So, building groups are things that happen around the same time. So in this case, we would have Expo, Factory, Racks. These all happen at around the same time in the early game. We're not as concerned with exact ordering in the start. The idea is that we begin with these building groups. And for a very long time, notice that we just have barracks, factory, orbital. And then we just look for the next big set of things to be thrown down. Like this. E-bays, or 2 barracks, 2 E-bays. Cool. So 2 racks plus 2 E-bays. Nice. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a third group just based upon what we're seeing here. And it's important to note that these things end up being pretty loose. Starport plus Tech Lab for tanks. Now, there ends up being more parts to this build order, but the idea is when we establish these very simple groups of buildings, what we then do is we start filling in the units and the upgrades. And what we start to see when we begin to flesh this out is we start to see that, wow, there's a lot of interesting timings that end up happening. For instance, at the very start of the game, we build some Marines. I'll go ahead and give the exact number, 3 Marines plus 4 Hellions. In a game, it's very, or I should say when watching a game, it's very easy to just say something like, Pult is building 6 Hellions, 6 to 8 Hellions in the course of the game. And what do? You just build 6 to 8 Hellions. But again, we're trying to flesh out these groups that we had earlier on. So for instance, what we end up seeing is that in fact, it's not just 6 Hellions get built right at the start. No, in fact, it's 4 Hellions, and then 2 more Hellions get thrown down here. So if we actually pop back here, we ask what units get made in group number 1, Expo Factory Racks. We literally look for just this group, and when 2 racks and 2 E-bays start to be thrown down, then we check out again. Notice how, again, these 2 Hellions get made quite a bit later. They actually get built with this set of buildings. And probably most interestingly of all, we don't really build any Marines until part 3. So, cool. Now, I've given a very, very, very brief explanation of what's going on, so that way if you didn't watch last week's, you're getting a sense of it. It'll all be filled in a lot more when we start on the Zerg front, but here are the basic ideas that I want to make sure that everyone's on the same page with before we begin. Let me just go ahead and say Marine Production plus Stim got started really early, plus 2 medevacs, plus tanks. Cool. Now, let's say our build order ended here. Let's say this is done. We don't have anything more that we want to do. We're literally the greatest players in the world. We kick ass. And you're definitely asking me something like, Sean, what about this advanced thing? I'm actually going to breeze over that really quickly right now. That is a good question. That's actually a question I saw from the chat. I do read you guys. So, okay, in terms of ordering, this is just simple ordering. The fact that the expo, then the racks, then the factory occurred. Or that this is the way things went. We focus on this last. Here's the first concept that I want to focus on. The first of the three big concepts I want to begin on is that we only focus on the buildings at the start. That's how we learn build orders. That's how we think of build orders. We think of them in terms of the buildings first. And when we get that down, then we work with the units, filling those in. And then, as the last step, we work on the ordering. And the goal is that at the very, 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 very end, whoopsie daisies, the final step is something like 10 depot, 12 racks, 13 gas. This is our final step, but even then, we're going to spend a lot more time just reordering and that sort of thing. With this framework, with a framework like this, we've now taken all the complexity that exists in a build order, and we've not only made it simple, but we've made some clear things to adjust. What happens if we are getting attacked early with Zerglings, and we're having a lot more trouble staying alive? Well, we might do something like this. We might just move these two Hellions and make them earlier. What if we're finding that we're getting our upgrades too early? Well, we will see this kind of effect happen. In each area, we can adjust the chunks that we have created for ourselves. We don't have to do something like we lose a game and think, oh, maybe I need to build more Immortals. Maybe I need to build more Colossi or something like that. We can clearly see stuff that we have to adjust. The second big thing that I want to note about this sort of build order setup is that it might seem a little bit daunting at first. The idea is that if you just focus first on this and then focus on this till you have all of this together, and then focus on this until you have all of this together, then you're going to be okay. It's almost like on the first day of going to like college or something like that, that your class schedule seems really awful and scary and confusing. So you have your piece of paper and you're going around and you're sort of looking at things and, oh, is this the right area? Midway through the semester, you just go to your classes instinctively and it's not a big problem. But that little sheet of paper you had at the start helped piece everything together. And the third, last thing, I'm sure I had a third thing. I had a third thing. Yes. This is the fastest way that I have seen for someone to get good at a build order, is to go in this order. Buildings first, units this way, racks this way. I have played StarCraft competitively for, I think this is going to be, is this my 13th year? Yeah, wow, yeah, year 13. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and it's so easy to be completely overwhelmed, but this is very, 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 very fast. So, now that we've gotten a lot of that out of the way, let's step into asking these questions from the Zerg point of view. As I clear this off, the big issue that comes in with Zerg is the fact that drones can be very, very, very confusing. How do you deal with them? The fact of the matter is, hell, let me just come over here to this phase in the game with Nerchio and his production. Let me even come back a little bit. Saying things like, well, do we get drones now? When do we start Zergling production? We have a couple Zerglings coming out now instead of drones. A few more drones come up. This Roach Horn's going to finish. We're going to see roaches pop out. Ugh! It feels like an entirely different beast. It's so much more of a focus on the units that are here instead of on the buildings back home. But have no fear. We're going to take care of all that. Because we've been looking at this game so much, what we're going to do now is focus on doing builds from the Zerg point of view. Excellent. First thing we're going to do is create some... We're going to create some simple building groups. Basic building groups is the thing I'm going to do. Let's go ahead and create the simple building groups excuse me, for Nerchio's build. Now, what we're going to do is literally ignore what's going on with the larva. Completely ignore. The one thing that we are going to make sure that we include is when gas geysers go down. Those are quite cool. We're going to focus a ton on this. And do not watch replays slowly when you're trying to mimic a build, when you're trying to copy a build. Just watch through it quickly and make sure you get these basic building groups down. Now, we see hatch, pool, gas go down at around the same time. Nice. Ba-da-da-da-da. Hatch, pool, gas. You're noticing, if you watched last week's daily, nothing's new. We're just focusing on the building groups right now. And we're going to keep focusing on that. You might say, what about queens? What about drones and the larvae and how all that works? Ignore all that for now. Okay. Let's keep watching. Alright, well, I will declare this building group done. We don't really see that many other buildings going down. This upgrade we're going to focus on in a later portion. That's on the intermediate. That's on the sort of middle part of the difficulty of a build. But, oh, look at this. We have a hatch, a roach warren, and an extractor going down. Cool. Alright. Hatch, roach, gas. I want to note, these, I'll even put third here, these are not orders. To be extra explicit, I'm even going to make stuff a little out of order. Gas plus hatch plus pool. These are not orders, these are groups. These are just collections of buildings. Just collections of buildings. Once we get through the third group, I want to stop and just focus on this group logic a little bit more. Because I'm sure there's some Zerg buddies out there who have not focused too much on groups, as we did in last week. And if you're ever confused, go back and watch last week's Newbie Tuesday. So, okay, cool. Let me back up just a bit because I was busy talking and not writing down these buildings. Alright, what's the next thing that happens? Well, we have this extractor that's kind of placed out here. Is it part of the last group, or is it part of this next group that's going to be the layer going down? Layer goes down, we're actually going to see 2 evolution chambers go down. I think it's pretty clear to say layer plus 2 evos. And you know what? I'm going to put this gas geyser in there as well. This gas geyser actually happened sort of between this period and this period, but we don't want to get too specific yet. We do not want to get too specific. And cool, there's a baneling nest that also comes down. Baneling nest, yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty satisfied saying that. Baneling nest. And I'll also note the second gas got built as well. And I'm going to look around. Oh, look, there's an infestation pit. This would probably be in our 4th group. Infestation pit. I'm actually just going to stop right now. And before we... Wow, look, it's already break time. Before we end up hopping into the... wow, we actually took this gas quite early as well. Hold on, hold on. I missed this gas geyser timing. When did he build that? When did he build that? When did he build that? I'm just going to make sure that this is accurate, so that way if anyone is watching this thinking, I want to steal that. Yeah, you know what? Let's just go ahead and make this simple. Baneling nest, evo chamber, gas, gas. Cool. Nice and easy. Pretty clean. Okay. Now, to note, let me talk about the importance of building groups right now. Already, we can see a pretty clear build order. Oh, it looks like he starts off pretty normal. he gets a really fast third base before he gets his layer up, and he starts getting a lot of those Evo chambers before he begins ramping up and getting the Baneling nest. I mean, this is pretty... Where am I missing a gas? There it is. Whew. This is a pretty clear description of a build that fits into not very much space. This is pretty gosh darn easy. In the last daily, I talked about base your building groups around things like when expansions go down, when what's going on between the expansion, what's going along with the expansion. Zergs are generally expanding at a crazy rate, so just don't really worry too much about that. Just make sure that you are placing things together in approximate reasonable groups, because this is the simple basic skeleton structure of the build order. What is very, very nice about doing something like this at this point in time is that, let's say we are under a little bit of pressure right here. We're under a little bit of pressure. He builds some Hellions, we're getting a little bit delayed, we can't quite get out of our base with Hellions there. What is the most logical thing to do? Get a Roach Warren up, kill off his Hellions, so that way you can take that third. And then make sure you get a second gas geyser while you're doing that. Totally logical. Simply put, before you go on to anything in 3, before you do anything in 3, make sure you have everything in 2 completed. Simple as that. So go on to the next step, make sure you're done with this step. Simple. And it's always do the most reasonable, logical thing. What if you are under a lot of pressure at this point in time from 2 racks pressure and a bunch of Marines are coming down your door? Build some extra Zerglings, build some spines. Make sure you're feeling quite comfortable and quite safe. And then, after that, start getting roaches on a third and move on. What happens if you are at this phase in the game and blah, 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 anything at all happens? A huge attack begins to start busting down your front door. What are you going to use to defend it? Well, we're probably not going to be rushing to get our Baneling nest at that point. We're probably going to rely on roaches and Zerglings to help keep us alive. And this Roach-Zergling combination should be good. If not, then actually the build has a problem. But before we go on to step 4, we want to finish everything that is at step 3. Now, ordinarily I would want to go heavily into drones right now, but tragically, we just hit the end of part 1. So when we come back in part 2, we're going to think about drones in this situation, and this is where it's going to start to differ from last week's simplifying build order.